Hi, good morning. Welcome back, my friends, to the Imperfect Adventure podcast. Let me just pull up my notes for today. It's November, and I thought it was a really good month to talk about relationships. Relationships are a big part of who we are, what we become in our lives, how we grow, how we determine like our values, what's important to us. And they also bring with them a lot of happiness and joy, right? In relationships with people, we find joy and fulfillment and all that kind of stuff, but they can also be really hard, right? Please, I hope that most of you agree with me on that. And so I wanted to explore it in November, especially because it's the beginning of the, true like crazy 2 months of holiday season with Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and Christmas and all those things that bring people together, but can also kind of force us apart, right? There's like big feelings and big expectations and, all that stuff around the holidays. So I just thought that it was a really good theme for us to explore. And so last week I talked about in general, the way I see relationships and support systems and how to sort of determine what's going on in your relationships, maybe your own personal relational health with the people in your life. And so this week, I'm going to talk about siblings. Now, this is a place where I share personal stuff, but it's also, I'm not meant to like share anybody else's personal stuff, right? So I'm not really going to talk about, like, I'm not airing dirty laundry. Do you know what I mean? So I want to be careful. I want to honor, the people in my life. And so I really want to take it from the perspective of a parent and my kids' sibling relationship. I have 3 children. I also have, my parents are divorced. So I have step siblings. I've kind of lived in that circumstance as well. I have one biological sister. My husband has one biological brother. His parents are together, so that's just his only sibling. Me, I have 7 step siblings. And so, I have a lot of siblings, but you can't really control like your own sibling relationship as a child. Like there's so many dynamics that go into that. And especially for my sister and I, there was a lot of gray areas with, remarriages and step siblings and sort of where do we fit in that. And it was just a lot. And I still, like, to be honest, I still kind of work through that from time to time. And so I really felt like to what I can affect, like what I can have an impact on is my kids' relationship as siblings, sort of setting that container for them to understand, that their relationship is important and that it's actually separate from my husband and I, especially now as they're moving into teen adult years. That's what we're spanning right now. My kids are 15 to 21, almost 22. So, and then sort of setting them up for their adult lives with each other, like their relationships as adults. And I'm here to tell you, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm trying the best that I can. I'm learning from maybe the things I wish I had gotten when I was younger, or the way my relationships fall short, and, how I can help my kids sort of navigate that a little bit differently. And our family we're a little bit unique because of Jeffrey and his special needs, and the fact that, ultimately he is going to need support for his entire life. It is not a thing where he will grow up and be able to live independently and not need support. He may not live at home, but he's going to need a supportive environment no matter what, even if it's just financial support or transportation support. As a nurse, I'm most concerned about medical decision making for him, because I know that he does not really have the cognitive ability to weigh all of that stuff out, risks, benefits, that kind of stuff. So he will need somebody, an advocate, to help him with those decisions. And the biggest piece, the thing that I keep thinking about is he is my most vulnerable, and he will always remain vulnerable in a different way than my other children will, because they will grow up and sort of take on that mantle of like self-protection. I always want to protect my kids from stuff, but Jeffrey even more so, because he's not really going to go through that maturity to become like his own full embodied man, making all of his own decisions. Like, he's going to need support. And so that leaves him vulnerable to being taken advantage of, or not really understanding what he's getting into. I opted to get full legal guardianship of him just about a year ago. We've done that, not even a year ago. Now, it was like 6 months ago, because I wanted to make sure that there was this like complete level of protection over him. But then that sort of leads to like, when I'm not here, somebody else is going to have to, step into that role for him. Right. And so, my children, I'm very aware, and I have been, since Jeffrey was born, that their sibling relationship is going to be very important in a different way than maybe my sibling relationships are, especially into adulthood. And the pressures on my kids, my neurotypical kids, that they're not going to get the same amount of like, I can do whatever I want freedom as an adult. Like, I've talked to them about, it's not a situation where you can just like pick up and move to Australia and like leave your brother in the United States with nobody checking on him. Like, that's not their reality. When you have, neurotypical siblings, you don't necessarily have to think about that. Like, this is a responsibility that will be a part of their lives in some way or another for all of their lives. Now, my husband and I obviously will do all of that heavy lifting now, and as long as we physically and mentally can, but we will age. And so circumstances will change. And that's a little bit scary. Jeffrey's 19, and that is definitely a worry. And what I realize now is that, the adult portion of your life is a whole heck of a lot longer than your childhood. So we're really kind of in it now. He's an adult. We're on the other side. Like, this is the marathon. This is the long haul stuff of parenting a special needs adult that we're in, decades and decades. Hopefully, I want Jeffrey to have a very long, fulfilling life. So anyway, how does that relate to siblings? That's just kind of setting the stage for the things I think about when I think about my kids as siblings. When they were younger, it was more about just like managing, who was upset with who and who was taking somebody's toys. And we have a daughter and then 2 boys. So actually my oldest and my youngest, they're about 6 years apart, more than 6 years apart. And so their relationship was hard because they were just, developmentally so far apart. But now, and as they go into adulthood, that difference is going to get smaller and smaller. And I was acutely aware that I wanted them to have a close relationship, especially because they're going to need to come together to make decisions for Jeffrey. And I didn't want there to be this animosity and them not being able to cooperate with each other and really kind of figure it out what's in the best interest for Jeffrey. Because as a nurse, for good or bad, I would see different family dynamics and what would happen when all of a sudden the family needed to care for an aging parent or, a sibling, or there was some, horrible accident or something, that caused an injury or cancer diagnosis or something, and sort of how families did that well and how families didn't do that well. And so as I was keenly aware of like, how can I help my kids? How can I give my kids the tools that they need, knowing that caregiving for Jeffrey is going to be their reality at some point. So how can I give them the tools and the words the conversation, the ability to talk about and advocate for themselves. Because I don't want one kid being like Jeffrey's caregiver and the other kid is off like, la, 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 no responsibility. I want it to be shared. That's only really fair. Because I want them to have their own lives and their own families and, all of that kind of stuff. Like the burden thing is really hard. And so I tried to be intentional about helping them communicate with one another and impressing upon them that their relationship, my oldest and my youngest, that their relationship is really, really vital and really important. And to understand that cultivating that, it will be helpful if they make it a priority instead of sort of, my annoying little brother or my big sister, like she's just, doesn't care about me or she's not ever around or right. Which they do that stuff. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this, but sort of me recognizing I try to be upfront about stuff. And when they would really get into it, sort of intervene and say, okay, guys, like, you don't want to hurt each other's feelings to the point where you hold grudges as adults, like kind of work through some of this stuff, normal sibling stuff, but like, don't let it fester and don't let it become your relationship, value your relationship and work at your relationship now, because it is incredibly important and it's going to be for your lifetime. It's also interesting if you know anything about birth order. I'm the youngest. My husband's the youngest. And so, we have 3 kids. So you have that like middle child, which I never experienced on my own because I just haven't, our birth order in my family is my sister's the oldest and I'm the youngest. But we kind of fell into that sort of those norms a little bit. But because Jeffrey is our middle, it's sort of changed things a little bit. And it's been interesting to see that as well. I sometimes think that my younger son is really more of a middle and Jeffrey's really more of the baby of the family in some ways, just because he always needed help and we couldn't not help him. So the invisibility of the middle child, I see a little bit more in my youngest. And it's been interesting where my daughter, my oldest, she's kind of traditionally like oldest child sort of energy. And so I've had to rethink some of that. Now, I don't think that this explains everything. I don't think that there's anything that explains everything about everyone. Like even when I've talked about like personality typing or strengths or Enneagram or, any of those self-assessments things that I've done or talked about, I find them fascinating, but I don't think that's always like, this is exactly what's happening. This is exactly what's happening. And this explains it all. I look at them as a resource and as information to sort of, does this resonate with my own personal experience or the experience of my children? And I will say that the birth order information, when I started looking at it and thinking about my own children as they've grown, and I was like, oh, like, it's interesting that there's been a little bit of a shift in my family. So recognizing that has been helpful because I've got this, oldest child, type A, very driven. And then you would think that my youngest was this, the baby of the family and all of that, that it brings with it. And he does have those qualities, but also understanding that some of that invisibility, especially when we're in stress, when the family's in stress, he doesn't want to stress us out anymore. So instead of the baby of the family, normally, this is just my experience, kind of becomes like I just want to make everyone happy and I'm just going to be pleasant. And the middle child sort of disappears. My youngest sort of disappears when we're in stress. And so recognizing like, oh, if he disappears in stress, and I've got my oldest daughter who's very take charge in stress. What's going to happen when they're stressed out, when they're caregiving for Jeffrey, and I want to balance that and give them some tools for like my oldest to kind of say, hey, your brother has as much of an opinion as you do. You don't necessarily know all the right things to do. And so give him space for his voice and his choice and what he needs to advocate for himself. And then also for my youngest, to explain to him that, like, hey, you may want to be invisible and you may want to withdraw from the situation, but what you really need to do is advocate for your brother and advocate for your own needs so that you're not kind of run over in the process. Because then what happens is you harbor resentment. And I could see, my oldest harboring resentment for, like, I got to make all the decisions, I got to plan everything, I got to do everything. And then my youngest harboring resentment for, like, nobody asked me my opinion, you just tell me what to do, you just boss me around, it's my brother too, like, why don't I have a say? Like, I can see those types of things happening. And so while I'm alive, I really want to help them with the little things now to be able to better communicate, because those patterns are there and they've already emerged. So how can I help my kids be aware that that's what's happening? How can I have them be honest about their feelings and emotions, awareness, and then verbalization of that? And then how can they compromise so that they both feel like they're being heard and they're kind of in it together, and a partnership, like teamwork, as opposed to, I do everything and you do nothing type of conversation. That is definitely on my mind. So that's something I think about often, maybe more than I need to. And then also gender differences, my daughter is the oldest. And so the oldest daughter, and this is all traditionally speaking and like very broad stroke, but, I remember, having her and then having Jeffrey and kind of thinking, oh, good, like I've got the daughter, like the nurturer, and that's just like old school. Please don't write me any hate mail, because I know how sort of, that's old school. That's old school. It's just, we don't have to feel that way anymore. But it definitely crossed my mind. And what's actually really funny is my daughter is not as naturally nurturing as my son. Not that she's not nurturing. She's going to be a fantastic mom. Meg, if you're listening, please do not be offended by this. But she is definitely a kind of get stuff done person, a little bit less than a like, oh, let me like cuddle and hold you and, nurture you. And that type of she's not that type of an energy, where my son, my youngest, he is our sensitive guy and very just like empathetic and intuitive about emotions and caring, and sort of a little bit of a softer, which is funny. So let me say this too. This is actually me and my husband, same way. So I'm a little bit, my daughter totally gets it from me. I'm less of a natural like nurturer than my husband is. And so he's a little bit softer than me, and I'm a little bit more like driven and direct and that kind of stuff. It has served us well as parents. And I will say I'm incredibly nurturing to my children. And I do consider myself a fairly good mom. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I don't aspire to be perfect anymore. I dropped that mantle, moms. You can too. It's not worth it. It's too heavy. We don't need to carry all that. But knowing that, it's sort of, if they can both leverage what they're really good at, like my son might be like the direct caregiver when he needs to be, because it might be more in his wheelhouse, where my daughter might be more of the kind of organization person and making sure like legal documents are done and, finances are taken care of. And, if he needs in-home care or something like that, like organizing caregivers and, just those types of things that she might be just really, really, really good at. And then she can lean into that, but they can both have that conversation about what they want to do and how they want to support Jeffrey and what feels right for their life and their strengths. Like, that's the important thing to me. They're going to, end up probably doing some stuff that they don't love, love to do. That's life. They're not going to like love to do every little thing that they're going to need to do. But if they can do most of the things that they enjoy and sort of lean on each other in that way, that like, oh, I know my sister's really good at that. And so she's going to do that. And then, oh, I know my brother is really good at that. So he's going to do that. I think that's just going to create a much better, teamwork. We're in this together. We're supporting each other. We love Jeffrey. We both love him. And oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. I didn't expect that. Like, we both love Jeffrey and we want what is best for him and we want to protect him. And my mom and dad, our parents set such a good example, which I'm hoping that we're doing, that we're going to continue that for him and then be an example to our own families. Because Jeffrey's going to be in their families too, in a very different way. Like their spouses are going to have to sort of accept that, like, this is a part of who they are. And then, their children, my grandchildren, I hope will have a different worldview too, because of Jeffrey. And like, of course, Uncle Jeffrey is going to be around and, maybe we bring him on vacation with us, right? Like that's not what other families do, but that's what our family does. And I just really want that for my kids. And I know it's going to be important. It's going to be, I'm not going to be here forever. And my husband won't be here forever. And it's a little bit terrifying to think about because it's scary. Oh, gosh, sorry, guys. It's really scary. And I don't want Jeffrey to be alone because I didn't prepare well and support my kids and set them up for success after I'm gone. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's not perfect now. I don't want Jeffrey to be alone. And I don't want my neurotypical children to be overburdened. And that is a really, obviously, but my crying is a really hard place to be, especially because a lot of this is going to happen after I'm gone. And so I'm not going to be able to fix it if things go awry. So I'm sort of preemptively preparing. And the proof will be in the pudding. The proof will be in the, how well things go. Hopefully decades and decades from now. I mean, I want to live for a long time. Like if I can get to like my 90s, that'd be great. And get there in good health so that I can still be an active participant in Jeffrey's life, for as long as possible. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on siblings today. I got a little more emotional than I expected to, but I hope it was helpful for you. I hope it gave you some things to think about. And, if you want to talk about stuff more, I always put in the show notes a way to contact me, to go ahead and message me. I'd love to talk to you about your perspective and give you some encouragement if that's what you need. And I so appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.